Hello, I'm Debbie Brown, a Handi Quilter educator. I quilt on a Handi Quilter Suite 16 and I teach machine quilting at quilt shows around the world. In this video, I would like to show you the various functions and features of the machine and how to adjust them so that you can quilt in comfort, with confidence, and have the best possible quilting experience. You have the option of adding a stitch regulator to your machine. It's the TruStitch from Handi Quilter. It will assist you in keeping your stitch length even while you're doing your quilting. Once that is plugged into your machine, it will change what is happening in your screen. So when you look at the top left now, it will say regulated. Right underneath that, where the Handi Quilter logo used to be, it now says manual and regulated for your stitch mode. If you have the regulator attached to your machine but still choose to stitch in the manual mode we just discussed, you can simply press the manual button and it will bring all of your features back. When in regulated mode, you can still choose your needle up and down. You can still relocate your needle by pressing the up-down button. But on the right side of your screen, you get to choose the stitches per inch rather than the speed. So you can choose from 4 stitches to the inch, all the way up to 18 stitches to the inch. And that's what SPI is, stitches per inch. The component pieces of your TruStitch are the receiver, which is what is talking to your Suite 16, regulating the stitch. The controller sits under your fabric. It measures the motion against the table and how fast you're moving. It will change the speed of the motor to give you that consistent stitch length. If you don't want to hold your hand over the controller, you can simply use the magnet and attach it to the fabric. You can also use the coaster and attach that to the end of your fabric if you have a small piece of fabric with not enough room to put the controller underneath. The controller has a locator light on it. It is light sensitive. When it's under your quilt, as I'm covering this, your quilt would cover this sensor, a light will blink, helping you to find this item under your quilt. On a small piece of fabric like I'm using today, it's no problem to find your controller, but if you have a large quilt, you may not know where it is and have to find it. The blinking light will show through your fabric and help you locate your controller. When you're ready to quilt, you take the controller, place it under the fabric. You can see the light blinking through the fabric to help you find it. When I get started quilting, did my needle down and needle up. That's going to pull up my bobbin thread. I can take a few small stitches in place to knot the thread, and now I'm ready to quilt. I'm going to make a hoop with my hands and place one of my hands over the controller. Keeping my hands facing up, I'm going to move the fabric, and you can hear it's going to go slower and faster as I move the fabric slower and faster. It's giving me a consistent 12 stitches to the inch right now. If I want to understand how this works, the cruise speed is at 10%, and what that means is when I press my foot pedal down, the needle is going at 10% of the motor speed before I move the fabric. So it's going, and now it'll speed up to catch up with me. When I pause in a corner, it's going to take a stitch to give me a nice sharp point, and I can continue stitching again. If I don't want to hold that controller with my hand while I'm quilting, I can use a magnet that comes with it. It just holds the controller to the fabric, and as I'm moving the fabric, the controller moves along with it. I like to place the controller behind the needle. It gets it out of the way of my hands and out of the way of my design. Now on a Suite 16, the table is cut to show the machine. There's a table overlay over the machine right now so that I have a clean surface for the regulator to read. If I did not have this optional table overlay on my table, I would only be able to hold the controller on the left side of the machine or the right side of the machine. But with the overlay, it's covering the body of the machine itself, and I can use the controller anywhere I like. When I start working with cruise, the 10% is a nice speed to work at. But if you're trying to change the speed and see how the adjustments work, I'm going to put it at 0. What happens then is when I put my foot down, my foot is now down, the needle is not moving. It's going to wait until I move the fabric to start working. It's a little hesitant. There's a lot of inertia to overcome. I do not quilt with it at 0%. I'll take it up to about 5%. And the needle starts moving before I move my fabric so that I've overcome that inertia. If you still find that too sluggish, you can take it up to about 10%, and that's usually where I leave it. When you're quilting and moving your fabric, it's very important to keep your fabric oriented as it is. My hands are always pointing up while I'm quilting. The one thing you want to be sure not to do is to rotate your quilt while you're quilting when the TruStitch is attached. The purpose of the TruStitch is to sense the movement against the table the way the fabric is moving under the needle. But if I rotate the fabric, the stitch regulator is moving faster across the table than the fabric is moving under the needle, giving you an uneven stitch. If you're going to quilt and rotate the quilt, you will get larger stitches and smaller stitches, depending on if this TruStitch is moving faster or slower than your fabric. So it's very important to keep your fabric oriented the way it is and not rotate it while you're stitching. If you need to reposition your quilt, stop stitching, take your foot off the pedal, turn the fabric, and then you can resume quilting any way you like. Just do not rotate the fabric while you're stitching. If you have a small piece that doesn't have enough fabric to put the TruStitch underneath, you can attach this coaster to the edge of your quilt sandwich, pick up your TruStitch and place it in the coaster. When I'm going to quilt now, it will just follow along the side of my quilt instead of underneath.